Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next avatar discussion topic. This one's going to be all about chi, the chi paths, chakras and more, with the idea of explaining how bending works in quite a bit of detail. So this video is not going to have a ton of visuals in it because once you know the general layout of the chakras and what the idea of the chi paths are, there's not really a lot to picture here, and it's mostly sort of speculation, making some connections and so on. But you know, I think I'll explain it pretty well. So let's just jump straight in. So I think the first thing to note is that in the avatar world, all humans have chi. Chi is basically just another word for energy. So it means whether you're a bender or a non-bender, you have chi, you have chakras, all the same stuff is there. And the difference, though, is that a non-bender cannot manipulate their chi, whereas a bender can manipulate their chi, extend it past their body, and then manipulate their element that way. So it creates this dynamic that it's not that there's something inherently different between a bender and a non-bender. It is literally just that a bender has this sort of extra energy within their body that allows them to control their chi and connect to one element, whatever it actually is. So that means that whether you run around a lot as a non-bender and get tired, or you're a bender and use your bending a lot and get tired, you're utilizing the same energy source fundamentally. But that means basically your motion as well as your bending are both powered by the same source of energy within your body. And that's why when we see benders overuse their abilities and get tired, it's the same tiredness as just overexerting yourself physically, full stop. So that's an important kind of connection to make, which brings us then into, I suppose we'll quickly cover the origin of bending and where this unique difference between a bender and a non-bender actually comes from. So humans first get bending from the lion turtles back in the era before the avatar. Of course, humans live on the back of lion turtles, and when they go out to hunt, they are temporarily given the power of an element by a lion turtle, with the idea that they have to give that back to the lion turtles when they come back into the lion turtle city. So we directly see this with Juan and the hunters and so on. That's just how it works. But because of Juan's actions, humans begin to take bending permanently. They take the element, go into the spirit wilds, and don't come back. With the idea that this is humanity once again sort of attempting to regain its independence by living in their own world once again. So this is where we get our first permanent benders from at this point in time. And of course, over the course of this story, we see Juan become the avatar and start the era of the avatar, which ends the era of the lion turtles. After this, the lion turtles decide to leave the world. They won't give humans bending anymore, but the idea is that just before they leave, it seems like people are given the choice. They can't live on the backs of lion turtles anymore, so do you want the power of an element or not before we leave? And that's where we're left in the world as Juan begins his journey as the avatar, basically. With humans who have bending, some don't, but these are our first kind of first separation of people who at this point are benders and will be benders for the rest of their life versus people who are non-benders and won't be benders ever, basically. So when the lion turtles leave, bending is then passed on, of course, through a mix of genetics and spirituality. I don't really think it's that big of a debate. I think it was much more of a debate before Korra happened, but then we got so many examples through Korra that it's just clear from just pure number of examples, different types of examples, that is how it works. There's just so many clear examples, whether it's non-bender and non-bender having a bender child, two benders having a non-bender child, say Katara and Aang actually having a non-bender, an airbender, and a waterbender, all of the possible options. It makes it very clear that, okay, genetics is a huge part of it, of course, just in your lineage, do you have bending in it? If so, it is possible for you to have a child who is of that element. And I think the fact that that is even possible for people who are non-benders sort of implies that any non-bender who then goes on to have a bender child and their partner isn't sort of from that nation, that probably somewhere in the previous lineage of that non-bender, they probably had someone like their father or whatever was actually a bender as well. And it sort of just implies that the power of that element sort of just kind of waxes and wanes in a way, like over the course of the generations. That sometimes it's like it's weaker here, so you're not a bender. Other times it's more powerful, so you are a bender. Because the technical terminology here is, of course, that when the line turtles talk about this, they talk about giving humans the power of an element, and that a human holds that power of an element within their body. So they're specifically using energy bending to grant this specific power, this amount of power, into someone's body. They hold it in their body, and that power is what makes them a bender. It immediately alters them from not being able to manipulate their chi to now being able to do that, but also to manipulate a specific element, because we know that there are four, I suppose, different types of line turtles. One has the power of fire, one has the power of air, one has the power of water, and one has the power of earth. And that there are multiple, there are dozens of line turtles, so there was multiple of each, basically. And so that's where the distinction between different benders comes from, because the line turtles know what sort of elemental affiliation they have, what power they can grant. We don't know where they got that power from, if they were born with it, created with it, or whatever, but that's the way it is. Juan has to go to 4 different line turtles to collect the elements, and that's how he ends up having all 4 of the elements, is by visiting a line turtle of each element. So this gets into the idea that, of course, okay, what fundamentally separates a bender from a non-bender is that whether through, if we're talking about the past, being directly given the power of an element by a line turtle, or by harmonic convergence, as we see with the new airbenders in Korra, or by just being born as a bender. A bender has the power of an element that they hold somewhere within their body. And this is where we have to bring up some of the deeper terminology here, which is where we're going to bring in chakras, chi paths, meridians, and stuff like that to try and explain this a little bit more. So the core ability of bending, once again, is the ability for someone to harness their chi, extend it past their limbs, and in the case of fire, turn it into fire, or in the other elements, manipulate their element. So that's the core ability. This is also why there's sort of a connection in a way between all 4 of the elements, because the core ability is actually the same. It's energy manipulation. But the end result of each of the 4 elements is, of course, that you bend a different element, which highlights why it's so important that energy bending is sort of the root of everything. All of these abilities are granted to humans by energy bending, as well as the ability to grant energy bending to someone via the same technique itself. It highlights the whole idea of like the illusion of the difference between the 4 elements and the 4 nations, because at their core they are actually the same. It's just a different end result in the end. So there we go. There's the core explanation of sort of bending and how it works. But the question is, whereabouts does a human like hold the power of their element, and how does that work? So as far as we're aware, like we don't know exactly. It's never stated exactly where this is, but this is where we'll get technical on the different parts of the body. So when Katara goes to get her waterbending healing training up in the North Pole, of course, she goes to Yagoda, the healer. And Yagoda is doing basically training on like chi paths, basically with a mannequin. And you can see directly, like, this is the chi path network of the body. It's these kind of like channels that go all the way up through the body. It mainly focuses down sort of like through the center. There's not as many, say, going down the arms or the legs. But especially around the kind of chest and head area, there's a lot of different chi paths. And this is what basically healers focus on to sort of channel their healing, because they're ultimately using waterbending to sort of channel energy to where there's a wound. So they have to know where the chi paths actually are to get the best healing possible. So that immediately confirms to us that, like, okay, like, sort of in a way, this almost like invisible pathway beneath people's skin is this flow of chi, the energy through the body. But we also then learn in the episode The Guru about the 7 chakras, which are these pools of energy. They're spiraling energy within the body, and there is 7 of them, of course. And if you have all 7 of them open, unrestricted, it allows for an incredible flow of energy through your body, and so you're not really restricted at this point. And so for the avatar especially, this is very useful for the avatar state, where you're channeling a huge amount of energy through your body. Any restriction is going to heavily limit that, so you need the chakras open for something like that. And just in general, it is helpful to have the chakras open to use a large amount of energy in your body. So the 7 chakra points are, of course, 4 of them are named after the elements, which is very, very interesting. And then you have the, the light, the sound, and the thought chakra. So, like I said, 7 elemental ones, and then 3 non-elemental ones. So that's very interesting in terms of, like, oh, does that immediately present to us where the power of an element is stored? We already know that the chakras are these pools of energy, spiraling energy, so energetic energy, not just like a storage tank of energy, basically. It's always moving around and stuff like that. This is where you really channel energy through your body, is through your chakras. Is this where the power of an element is stored? That if you're a firebender, your special power of fire is stored within your fire chakra. And so that is the core difference between a non-bender and a firebender, is that both people have a fire chakra point located in the stomach, but a firebender's chakra point is sort of empowered by the power of an element that they got either from a lion turtle or by just being born with it that way. And so the idea is that then a bender's core ability to manipulate their chi is sort of like influenced by the power of fire. So they're basically channeling this power of fire chi through their body, and that's what allows them to sort of latch their energy onto fire and manipulate it. Now, whether that's because, like, literally the power of an element is like the essence of an element, and that all fire gives off this, power of fire energy, and so there's just this connection in that you hold a bit of fire within you so you can connect to other fire. The same with the other elements, of course. Fire is almost like a special example because you can create it yourself. But say for earth, the idea is that, does earth always sort of radiate off this sort of earth energy? And so an earth bender having their earth chakra empowered allows their energy to then link to anything that also radiates off this earth energy. And then the power level of a bender would obviously sort of be determined to a degree by, like, how big, I suppose, the power of their element within their body is, or potentially how, like, large their chakra is, or just how much energy they can control through their body. So if their elemental chakra is always giving off a lot of energy, it means they're going to be a powerful bender, and you have all that sort of speculation going on. And I think that fits. Like, it obviously is a theory in that it's never directly said in the show that the elemental chakras are inherently linked to the element. But if you look at how Amon's bloodbending technique works to take away people's bending, and a lot of people don't even know this, and that, like, it's called taking away people's bending, but he never actually takes away people's bending. It's basically just super, super fancy chi blocking that is done via bloodbending. So Amon's technique is that he's a bloodbender. He uses bloodbending to manipulate the water within people's body, and does chi blocking using that. So internal chi blocking focused on the internal chi paths. And then because of the Korra example, where Korra still has her airbending, but doesn't have her other elements, it's clear that the chi blocking that he's doing isn't just, like, all over the body. Korra can still airbend properly, like, no problem, highlighting that he's specifically targeting parts of a person's chi network, or meridians, as I think Brian mentions in an interview at one time. It's never used in the show. I say chi paths just because it's sort of easier when talking to say that, and it's clearer because people know that chi means energy, and in chi paths I think links quite heavily into the diagram that we have from Yagoda. So he specifically targets parts of the body where he knows he can shut down your firebending here by, I suppose, targeting the fire chakra in the stomach. He knows he can take out your earth bending by targeting your earth chakra in the base of the spine, and that by targeting the sacral chakra, the water chakra, he can take out your water bending. But he's never taken anyone's air bending away before. So does he know about the air chakra in the heart? Has he done it before? Korra, of course, hasn't airbent properly at this point as well. So is it even fully activated at this point? So there's a few explanations behind why that is. But fundamentally, it highlights that Amon's technique is not wide-scale chi blocking. It's not as blunt as your Tai Li style chi blocking, where it's like punching someone in the arm to stop the flow of chi through their arm. No, he's kind of doing it in like reverse, where a normal chi blocker, you target sort of like the end points of where the energy is coming out. So typically a firebender is going to want to punch or kick to utilize their firebending. So you can limit them drastically by just, taking out the chi paths in their arms and legs. And it's only going to be for a while because you're just punching them to do that. Whereas Amon is kind of doing it in reverse. Instead of targeting the end points of where the bending is going to come from, he's sort of targeting the source, the center point, which is the source of fire within the body, which would be, as far as we're aware, the fire chakra in the stomach. So he cuts off basically the ability for the fire chakra to extend to the rest of the body. But for Korra, for instance, even though he's done it to 3 of her chakra points, her air one can still be activated because it is not blocked off. And because the chi is not blocked from flowing to her arms or her legs, she can still, of course, airbend once she activates it. And that's what I think more heavily links to the idea that those chakras are meant to be sort of viewed in this way. So the avatar, bending all 4 elements, means all 4 of their elemental chakras are sort of activated in this way. They each contain the power of the elements. Like the avatar has the power of all 4 elements within them, contained within the air, water, fire, and earth chakra. So that's really, really interesting to consider. So that's the core idea there, that of course, you channel chi from your sort of internal energy centers, like the chakra points, to the limbs, down the chi paths and so on, to punch or kick, to manipulate. And I assume there's some sense of like visualization going on here as well, because some of the technical stuff that benders do, you sort of question if like they just have the core ability to like manipulate their energy so much that they do something so specific to Earth. So there likely has to be a sense of like visualization, where like if you create a giant earth pillar and then try to kick some chunks out of it, I assume you're like in your head thinking like, this is what I want to do. So as you channel your energy, it just sort of like happens in a way, which maybe helps to explain how on a higher power level, psychic bending then comes about. That there are benders who have the ability to, just with their mind, activate their bending in that same way. So that's an interesting one also. This then brings up the sort of newer point here that even I only just recently found out about. And that is that there is another point on a person's like energy network that we know about now, and that is a person's Dan Tiens. Now, where does this come from? It comes from the Legend of Korra video game. So Hundun, when he explains his plan, explains that he plans to extract Korra's chi from a location on her body that is described as being her Dan Tiens, D-A-N space T-I-E-N. You find it the spelling in the 3DS version of the video game. So his plan is to extract Korra's chi to use in his own body to basically sort of recreate some sort of a physical form for himself, because Hundun is this human who was defeated by the Avatar in the past, like 1,000 years ago, and had to meditate into the spirit world to escape being fully, killed and defeated for good. So he spends like 1,000 years in the spirit world, meaning he basically becomes a spirit. When Korra opens the spirit portals, he comes out again, and he now has this, quest for revenge, which is to sort of regain the place that he had in the physical world. And even though he's a spirit and he's like immortal to a degree, he wants more of a physical connection to the physical world. And so, how can he become what he once was? He needs to restore a physical form, which he doesn't have anymore because he left his body behind. So he's basically saying that by stealing someone else's chi, which is a physical form of energy, because of course you can only bend when you have your physical body. So if you don't have a physical body, you don't really have bending as such. So you have to, I suppose, use chi as the core of what happens. And I suppose for him as a spirit, it's this idea of, what happens when a spirit just takes in chi, physical energy? Does it allow them to create more of a solid form and for that to become permanent? Because we know there's like a duality to this. Spirits can choose to take on a mortal form, and that mortals can choose to become spirits if they do like Iroh or the Painted Lady or Hundun did and meditate into the spirit world. So the one thing though is for, I suppose, newer spirits like that, how do you go about creating some sort of an actual physical form for yourself? And that's what Hundun is trying to do. But the point here is that he says that the mystics call it your Dan Tiens and that he can extract chi from it. It's this sort of like lesser known part of a person's chi network by which you can actually take the chi out of someone's body, which is not a concept we've ever really heard about before. We know about chi blocking, we know about like the more permanent styles of chi blocking, but the only thing that really resembles like extracting chi is the lion turtle and like Aang, I suppose, ability to take bending away. And even that seems a little bit more directly focused in terms of just taking that energy back, whereas that's the power of an element, not the chi itself. This is just directly taking someone's physical energy from their body and using it. With the idea, of course, being that the avatar's chi is going to be very, very powerful as well. So, what are dantians? Like chakras, they have like a real world, version as well. That is what the Avatar version is based on. And obviously, it's sort of almost like a competing but sort of similar idea to chakras, in that I think chakras is like based in yoga, and then I think dantians are based in like more Chinese sort of philosophies, with the idea being that there's 7 chakras, but there's like 3 dantians, with one of them being the main one. But here's the connection that we can at the very least make, is that when Iroh is teaching Zuko lightning redirection, he mentions that a key part of doing lightning redirection properly is to make sure that when you take the lightning into yourself, that you channel the energy into your stomach, which he also refers to as your sea of chi, and that there it's sort of contained, and you can hold it like for a second and then redirect it. That the only reason the technique is possible is by holding it in your sort of energy center within your body, which is your sea of chi, in the stomach, and then redirect it from there. Now the thing is, as far as I'm aware, a loose translation of the term Dan Tiens is sea of chi, meaning that the stomach has both a chakra point as well as a Dan Tiens in it. I don't think there's really anything in the rest of the universe that really connects to like the other 2 Dan Tiens points. And then based on the way the line is delivered in the video game, it's not entirely clear if he's referring to Dan Tiens being plural or just a singular thing. But either way, I believe from what I read up about, it seems like one of the Dan Tiens is more sort of considered than the other ones, and usually that is the lower Dan Tien, which is the one in the stomach. So that actually fits really well with that line from Iroh. Because I think a lot of people can just interpret it as like, oh, you channel it through your fire chakra, that's what it means. But I think in this case, it actually is more of a technique that is referring to your Dan Tien. Now, my take on this is that, okay, this means you have your chi paths throughout the body, which is why you can sort of harness and like use chi from different parts of your body. You have then the sort of center line of your body, the core 7 chakras, which are your main sort of the chakras I view as sort of being the place where you store your sort of like energetic energy that you're about to use. So energy, in my mind, flows from your dantien, your sea of qi. That's just where the energy is in storage. Not really active or anything like that. It's just energy to be used wherever. From there, it is channeled through the chakras, where it becomes sort of energetic throughout all of them. And then from the chakras, it then extends out into the rest of your body. That to me is the way like I view it. That way, not all energy has to be just for bending. Some of that energy can be used to just, running, stuff like that, just physical activity and so on. But when you then pass the energy through the chakras, especially if you're a bender, it inevitably has to go through one of the elemental ones. And that's what sort of almost like converts it into chi or energy that can be used to manipulate the elements. And then it goes into the rest of the body. I think that's actually a pretty solid way to kind of think about it in a way. It's almost like a computer in a way, of like you have your main storage, and then you have your RAM. And obviously for it to be quick and used like energetically in your computer, you want it to always be taken from the RAM, which is quick enough to actually communicate properly with the CPU, I suppose. Whereas you don't want your CPU to be taking it directly from the storage, because that's relatively slow. And I think that's sort of the way I view it here, of because the chakras are described as like spiraling pools of energy, and that it's important for there to be good flow between it. It implies it's like high energy going through the chakras, whereas the sea of qi is almost described as just like, it's just a big like lump of energy not really doing anything, but that is what allows you to sort of take lightning into your body and sort of hold it there for a bit and then channel it. Whereas, it would seem a bit like crazy, over the top, too energetic to channel that energy into your fire chakra point, which already is doing a bunch of crazy stuff with the rest of the chakra points. At least that's my view on things anyway. So that's just a fun one that I don't think a lot of people are even aware about, because either people just dismiss the video game outright, or even if they do note the specifics of it, they never really make the effort to try and incorporate it into everything else that we know. So I think, for me, that's a pretty solid explanation of sort of the origin of bending, how it works, in addition to on a technical level, also how it works. Obviously, until they fully reveal it to us, it's hard to fully speculate on, but I think a lot of it fits, even the point where it feels more like a theory, with the idea of what I sort of call the activated chakra point theory, which is that the power of an element is held in your elemental chakra, depending on what element or what bender you are. Even that sort of fits because of how a Mons technique works in practice. So I think that works, pretty well. And then the Dan Tiens thing acts as just this whole other level that I think also works quite well. Because it would be probably pretty crazy to try and extract like spiraling energy from someone's body, even if you're specifically targeting one point. So it probably would be easier to channel energy when it's just their sort of like energy storage part of their body, their dantien. That actually fits a little bit better. That not many people know about it or consider it that way, but this is the core of energy within your body, and he has found out a way to extract the chi from your body, Hundun. I think that's most of what I want to talk about here. Obviously, once again, the reasoning behind why a human can't have two elements is because of energy limits on the body. The Line Turtles directly say to Juan, no human has ever held the power of two elements. He says, I think I can do it. But the Line Turtle is like, okay, but Rava will have to hold the power of another element. And the whole idea is that until they fuse permanently at harmonic convergence, Juan only holds one in his body, and then Rava passes through him to exchange elements, and it also just in general increases his energy level as he goes through it. And so prior to harmonic convergence, the only time when Wan uses multiple elements at the same time is when Rava stays in Wan for a couple of seconds, and we get to see the sort of proto-avatar state, because at that point, like, Rava's energy allows Wan to hold everything in his body. And that's the whole point of harmonic convergence, is that the fundamental thing that does, yes, it bonds them together forever, but what it does to Wan is that it like changes his body to where there suddenly is no longer an energy limit. That's why the Avatar just can walk around, able to bend all four elements and contain a very powerful spirit in them at the same time. Now, obviously the Avatar is not fully like linked with the Rava 100% all day, every day. That's the point of the Avatar state. The Avatar state is when human and spirit are most closely linked. And that's why we then see Rava's light kind of come through the eyes. With the Air Nomad avatars, the tattoos glow, is because that's when it's fully linked. That's when all of the energy is going through the Avatar. And that's why it's so important. Which gets into like questions like, you know, people speculating about stuff like, oh, well, lava bending, the way it has to work is that it has to be an earthbender who has like firebending parents in their lineage. That's the only way it can work, that it is a technique that is earthbending but with like fire sort of kind of involved in it. And my issue with that is that if you take that as literally as people say it to be, that then implies that there has to be the same technique but in reverse. A firebending technique that then has an element of earth to it. Meaning that for every combination of two elements, there has to be two unique special abilities that link to it, depending on which element you're focusing on. So water and air, there has to be a water bending technique that has a little bit of air included in it, and there has to be an air technique that includes a little bit of water. And I don't think that works just because of the whole rule of a human can only hold the power of one element. And even if we're only talking about like the influence of someone from who has a different element, I still don't think it fits, because you're then trying to do this thing of like, you know, you're getting awfully close to, well, theoretically, lots of people could end up someday in the Avatar world having multiple elements, because if you're willing to go as far as to have an element have an aspect of another element, then why not have the triple combinations where like it's you have water with a mix of fire and earth, and this is an even newer technique. And that's why I think for simplicity's sake, I do like the interpretation more that, look, it took them a while. In Avatar, they were, I think, leaning in the direction that lava bending was more of a fire bending technique, but they doubled down in Korra on the fact that it's a special earth bending technique. It just is an earth bending technique, and it just happens that Bolin has it, and he happens to have a fire bending side to his family. But the other lava bender that we have, Gazan, doesn't really seem to have a firebending connection as far as we're aware. Plus, the main reason people associate lava with fire is purely because there's sort of a heat element to it. But like I've said before, water bending also has the phase change thing where like you can turn it into ice, back into water, turn it into mist and steam. We don't go around saying that water bending is a firebending technique just because it involves this change of state. They're bending that element, and to a degree it implies they can change the state of it. It's a little bit different in terms of like the philosophy of each element, in that state change seems to be a perfectly like simple aspect of water bending, but that is a more complex ability for earth bending, which fits with the idea of like that the top earthbenders are the ones who can bend things that seemingly only have like a trace amount of earth in it. That's the importance of metal bending. The thing with lava bending is, I suppose, just getting that understanding of the fact that lava, even though it's in this more sort of fluid form, is still earth at its core, and gaining the connection to it that way. And that's why I've never had that understanding, because energetically wise, how does that actually work if we assume lava bending is an earth bending technique with an element of fire included in it? So it's someone who has the power of earth in their earth chakra, but they sort of have the power of fire in their fire chakra that impacts things a little bit. My interpretation on an energy level for, like, say, why Bolin is able to be a lava bender when, say, Haru is just a normal earthbender, is that Bolin's either the power of earth for him is just more powerful than other people, or his earth chakra is bigger in some way, or he just has more energy within his body that he can hold. To me, they're the explanations for why he can perform one of the higher level earthbending techniques, that he just happens to be born as one of these special benders who has this higher capacity for bending. And capacity for bending for me is there's bending power scale and then there's bending power precision. And so, say the bloodbenders, Amon, Tarlok, and Noatok, their technique is obviously, everyone views psychic bloodbending as being one of the most powerful abilities in the Avatar world. But it's powerful because of its like precision and control it has over people. They're not doing the biggest waterbending in the world that we've ever seen. Their power is just the raw control that they have. The fact that Yukon can walk into a room with like 50 people in it and just open his eyes a little bit wider and have control over everyone in the room. It's a great application of power, but the core of it is its precision. The fact that he can control that many people so delicately with waterbending, that's the power. And I think the idea is that like they if they wanted to, could maybe focus their bending power more on going for big scale. But when bloodbending is an option, why wouldn't you focus your power on that? Similarly with Bolin. Why doesn't Bolin have like the most powerful earthbending in the series if he's a lava bender? Well, obviously the power for Bolin and Ghazan is focused more in terms of like precision, that they can do reasonably big stuff, but the power ultimately for them showcases itself in the form of the fact that they can view lava as being earth and bend it, whereas even other powerful benders who don't have lava bending probably would struggle to make the connection and like have their energy connect with lava, because they just, the power of that precision isn't seeing that lava is earth, and that's the difference, I suppose. Why metal bending is such a technique is because, yeah, once you can make that connection and focus on like, okay, there are shards of earth within this piece of metal that I can bend, but do you have the power to see it in the first place? And then do you have the power to focus on those little shards and have them be the thing that overall bends that piece of metal? That's the dynamic here. So I'm just going to end the discussion there. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on just everything I discussed here. You know, how does bending work? Chi paths, meridians, chakras, and especially our new topic for today, Dan Tiens. What are your thoughts on this? How it overall works together? Do you have any different views on it than I do, or do you like my explanation? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.